Hello, Kool-Aids, and welcome to Barca Talk. I'm your host, Gabriel Quiroga, in the Spanish capital, and with me to talk about this week that was FC Barcelona is Craig McGeough in the UK. Craig, how are we doing, buddy?
Really good. How about you?
Yeah, much better. You know, the sun was out this weekend, so Madrid was alive for sure. Can't complain considering the circumstances. How about you?
Yeah, we're covered in snow. It's been freezing. And then I was speaking to someone who lived in Minneapolis last week, and I was saying it's freezing. It's -2. We've got, 2 inches of snow. And then I seen some pictures from Minneapolis and decided to stop complaining about the UK because it looks crazy over there. So, yeah, apart from being cold, I'm really good.
Yeah, in today's episode, we're going to go over the Copa del Rey defeat against Sevilla, where we lost 2-0. And then we're going to review the La Liga matchup last night against Alavés, where Barcelona had a fiesta of goals, winning 5-1. But first, let's get into the one-touch. You know, I love one-touch passing when I used to play, so this should be pretty fun on this type of end of just Barca debate. So the first thing I have for you is Umtiti's washed up and should only play rotational purposes, and I would just say, if any games anymore, because he's making way too many mistakes, really common mistakes, really bad communication mistakes, and it's crazy that maybe 3 or 4 years ago, two or 3 years ago, he was probably one of my favorite players, one of the best defensive players we had, and now I don't know what's going on. And more importantly, he's conceding too many of the goals when he plays.
For me, I would say, actually, as a positive, I think Trincao could be our new Pedro. I don't like comparing players to players, but I look at him and I really like him. And I think he could be that spark that teams don't double team because they don't think he's a Messi or a Griezmann, but he could provide some real value for us in the top half of the pitch.
For my next one-touch take, for Alba being a Hall of Fame left back for Barca, his crossing is statistically one of the worst I've ever seen, and it continues to infuriate me. I don't understand. We always remember the great passes that he's made through the middle, like the Clásico, right, against Madrid, where Messi came in the last minute, and those are the moments of passing, yes. But, man, his quantity of bad passes to the conversion just drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. I can't think of a better word for it. It's borderline criminal. Speaking of fullbacks, my next take is that if he carries on his current trajectory, I think McGeough could keep Dest out of the team on current form, even though I don't think he is a right back necessarily. I think, although I like Dest, McGeough has given us something that I really, really like at the minute, and I think he could be really cementing himself into a first-team place.
I want to see Dest more because I think he fits in that role, but my next take is, Craig, why is there always a remontada? Why? Like in the last 6 years, I feel like every time now, whatever competition, it's a remontada. Remontada, remontada, remontada. Why can't we just get a 0-0 tie? Like, to me, it's just like play the percentages. And I talked about this with Mariana in the Barca Talk Cafe. The last match in the Copa del Rey, when it was a single elimination, they looked like they had more ganas, more fight in that one match. And now with this home and away already, they kind of looked lazier. They kind of looked, all right, we already have a second match. So, Craig, again, I'm just tired of all these remontadas in the last 5 years.
Yeah, speaking of young players, my next take is that I genuinely believe that if all of the young players that we're bedding in this season, we've seen Mariba this week, we've seen Conrad get some game time, we've obviously got Dest that's come through, Minguez has come through, Araujo, I think that this season could set us up for many years of success following this season, assuming that these guys carry on their trajectory. And I'm probably the most positive I have been at any point this season.
You have a really great point. These are the young players that we've been, clamoring to get more playing time. Now, my next take has to do with the VAR. And again, there was another VAR controversy in the match against Alavés last night in the second goal with Messi and Trincao. And again, this is the thing that bothers me the most is that the referees still don't get tagged enough to look at VAR, right? And I think for next season, La Liga should look at an NFL-style system where a coach has one challenge per match to throw the flag. So at least you can kind of take the VAR out of this controversy every La Liga match. So that was our one-touch segment. And in today's show, we're going to deep dive and ask ourselves if Koeman is becoming the right coach for this Barca. Also, we know Dembélé is lethal in the open. After the break, we break down what he needs to improve in order to beat more defenders and get more goals.
Hey, this is Brian with Barca Talk. You know we'd love for you to support this podcast on Patreon, and here are 2 reasons why you should. 1, our private podcast feed for supporters, with no advertising and none of what I'm doing right now, asking you to support the show. And 2, the chat between supporters and hosts of the show we have going on WhatsApp. There are more benefits I haven't mentioned, so follow the link in our show notes to our Patreon page, learn more, and consider supporting us. Thanks. Now back to the show.
We're breaking down Dembélé's best moves and how he could master those moves to earn more goals and obviously help Barcelona in the future. Dembélé just played his 100th game against Alavés over the weekend, and we knew when he came he could be a lethal attacker for Barca. However, injuries have limited his playing time, but he is one of the most explosive attackers that FC Barcelona has, and ever since his arrival to the Camp Nou, he has been one of the most exciting players, I would say, in the last 25 years. Though he's one of the most exciting and explosive players, he still needs to figure out which moves work best for him to beat defenders and obviously score more goals. So let's dissect Dembélé, Craig. Let's first talk about his goal output, right? So, looking up the stats, like we have this great stat machine that we use for our stats on Wyscout. They break down his goals per game at 0.36 this season and an XG of 0.29. And in comparison with Messi has a 0.66 and an XG of 0.77. How many goals do you think consistently he could do every season if he does master moves and gets better at ball security?
In terms of raw natural talent, there's no reason why he couldn't be up there with, Messi levels of output. You can see that when he's in the right positions, he scores some amazing goals, and he actually seems to be more confident in front of goal when he's got no time to think. So I think it's not about technique or ability shooting. I think it's actually being in the right positions to take some shots. I think he could be significantly more fruitful for us in the years, and I think it's where he's finding himself on the ball, who's surrounding him, and just where he is on the pitch.
If we look at his goal output in the past seasons, in 2018-19, he had his best season, 14 total goals. But the other seasons have been underwhelming just because of injuries and lack of playing time. Now, I think he could definitely hit the 15 per season just with the amount of opportunities and matches, but it really all depends on how healthy he is. I think, if he can get to that 10 to 15, I think he could be so lethal for Barcelona because that speed alone that he can do, but more importantly, just the goal output, right? Like if Griezmann also puts another 10 to 15 and we still have Messi and obviously another 10 to 15, all of a sudden you're talking about a trident that's really potent and that XG and goal per game is really going to improve.
You've got a feel for him because obviously injuries have absolutely ravaged his career at Barcelona. And I think it wasn't just the time that he was out with injuries that, naturally less games played, less chance to score. But if we look at those seasons where he was coming back, so, particularly 17, 18, and then we look at 19, 20, even when he came back and played, similar to what we said, with regards to Umtiti at times, he doesn't look like he trusts his body, or didn't, I would say. I think what I've seen from him this season is that he looks a lot more at home in his own skin. He looks like he trusts his legs again. And I think for a professional athlete, particularly one that runs at that pace, I think that will really stand him in good stead. And I sincerely hope that he gets a good run, not even of form necessarily, but just a good run of health. And I think if we look at the numbers, as you said, 18-19, his best season, he was on 14. We're on 6 so far. So whilst, yes, we can compare that with others and the output that other players are giving us, but that's a solid start for Dembélé. That shows a bit of consistency that we probably haven't seen in a couple of years. And also the other thing that I think is harsh for him is that he came with a very large price tag, which, as we always say, isn't his fault. And also he plays in a team with a man in Messi who's just a statistical freak and who puts up numbers that have skewed the game. Him and Ronaldo have made 40 and 50 goals look normal, whereas if you scored 25 before these guys, you were taking home a golden boot and a new contract and a new magazine deal, and everyone thought you were a hero. So I think there's lots of things that we need to put in the mix when we start analysing Dembélé. But I do think he's trajecting upwards.
Yeah, definitely. And you highlighted here, just the comparison of him and Braithwaite so far in the last season and a half.
Yeah, and I think, we look at the numbers and that, Braithwaite in a season and a half has got 7 goals for us. he's a number 9, and we could argue whether that was good or bad, but we got him for for peanuts. Whereas with Dembélé in the last season and a half, because of injuries, he's also on 7. So we've got a £100 million plus player giving us the same as Brathwaite, who I think we all agree is a great guy but not good enough. And so I think on the surface, it's probably easier to really cast some shade at Dembélé and his output. But I think really to truly understand where we are with him, we need to go beyond the numbers, which is sometimes difficult to do in football and certainly for the media within football. But, I think he's definitely trending upwards. But what I would say is that on outputs alone, we really need to start seeing some good returns from Dembélé. And he needs this trajectory to continue, or else we probably need to be recouping some of the money back if we aren't able to get some of the stats that we thought we were getting.
For sure. And I also think, one of the, I love watching him, just the explosiveness, because as a player, I was never fast. And when I see someone as fast as Dembélé, it would often scare me, right? Because I was not the fastest, and I would always have to pay more attention to this. Now, I think, Dembélé, especially in when I've been hyper-focused, especially in the last 3 matches, I think one of the things he really needs to work on is ball security. And I just think he always plays so loose with the ball. And it's one of those things where if he was a La Masia product, I think his ball control and ball security would be much tighter. It's one of those things where I always feel that he always shows the ball too much. Now, on the season, he's averaging 64% successful plays, right? That number needs to be closer to 80, right? Because the amount of times that he loses the ball, that means it's a counter going the other way.
What I think is really interesting with Dembélé is that your point about La Masia is a great one, and I agree. I think he would be better at ball security. But Dembélé, outside of Barca and Ajax, is probably from the only other school of football that should actually allow him to flourish here is the French style. So their youth football is notorious for being very big on the fundamentals of football. Your touch, your passing, protecting the ball, positional play. And I think you only need to look at, in my opinion, the best French player that we'll ever have in Henry to see what Dembélé could be. Now, I'm not just singling Henry out because he's French, but it's a really easy comparison to make because they're compatriots. But Henry was a master at using his pace, not just to scare defenders when he was running, but to scare defenders when he wasn't, because they never knew when he would go. For me, Dembélé doesn't do that enough. He's quite one-dimensional when he runs. And I think, I've got lots of thoughts about when he should run and where he should run. But I think that's one of the areas that I would look for him to improve, is that, we need to control the ball in numerous ways. And that's not just beating men and getting the ball. It's holding the ball. It's running the clock. It's allowing people to get back in. And Henry was amazing at that. And it's interesting that that's something that Dembélé struggles with. And maybe it's because he went to Germany so young. I'm not sure. But it's an interesting diversion from where you'd expect young French players to be. That's for sure.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, that's a great point you just brought up about holding the ball for killing the clock, right? And those are the moments, especially when you are in Champions League, for example, in this week when we play against PSG. These are the moments where you have to play smart football, right? You have to win off the clock, go to the corner flag, hold the ball, try to keep, possession essentially. As I look about the last 2 matches against Sevilla, he had 103 opportunities, 48 were successful, Craig, and 55 were unsuccessful. That is, to me, too careless with the ball. And you have to know the moments of when to take 1v1, but more importantly, is there an opportunity there? What's the chance I should take? And obviously in the Alavés match, he came in late, so he only had 10 opportunities, and he was 10 successful opportunities. But when I was watching the video, a lot of it's just like a winning head, a quick pass, because it was in the last part of the game, and obviously the game was won. Again, I think Dembélé really needs to, if we're looking at this as like a Moneyball statistical analysis thing, if we can get him up to 75% successful plays for the season, I think the play and his goal output would dramatically increase.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that these are the 2 matches, and this is the time that we've chosen to talk about him. And I think it's because of these matches that we've really picked this up, which is look at those numbers and look at the scenario that he found himself in. Now, it's easy to say, well, it was late in the game. I think that's a red herring. I think the fact is the game was basically won. And where I think we see the best Dembélé is where he's not thinking. I've said this a lot. I think when he thinks, he makes bad choices. He overthinks it, or he underthinks it and he does something silly. Where we've seen the best Dembélé this season has been when either there is no pressure on him or he has no time. He has no time to shoot. To think about where he's shooting, and you find it going in the top corner. He has no time to think about where to pass it, and that's where his short passing has got better. It's because it's a case of I need to get this ball out and then I go. Where he seems to struggle is when he's got time to think or there's pressure on his shoulders. So that for me is also a really interesting insight into the guy's character, and it can go one of two ways. He either doesn't believe in himself, or he wants to achieve so badly that he finds himself making silly choices. And I actually believe it's the latter. I think it's because he wants to be a success. You can see in his body language, he wants to be liked and he wants to succeed. And I remember that image of when he scored last season, 2 seasons ago, and no one celebrated with him. You could see that it really, really affected him. So I think if we can get a confident Dembélé who's playing without overthinking it, then maybe that's when we'll see the best of him. Similar to Messi, you get the best Messi either when he's got a free roll and can do what he wants, or he's angry and he has something to prove. I think maybe with Dembélé, we'll find a little frame of mind that he can start to take the pressure off. And maybe what he needs is a solid season this year, get up to 12, 13, 14 goals or whatever, equal his best output, keep fit, get back into the team, get back in the system, and maybe next year we'll see him really explode into it. But these two games are really interesting for me and how I perceive Dembélé, and the stats back it up. What's your take on him mentally? Where do you see him?
Yeah, I think he's definitely improved. And I also think because there are more French on the contingency right now, right? On the contingent team right now. And I think that really helps. I mean, it's one of, especially when you move to another country or move to another team in this situation and you're the lone man out, it's very difficult, right? I mean, I think when he first came to the team, there was a disconnect because of the age, right? With the veterans and him. And I think that really, and now I feel like he's definitely more confident. I also think he's more comfortable in Barcelona and also what is expected of him. And also on top of that, obviously with the health, that's going to add to the confidence and also how he's feeling. Before, in the last 2 to 3 years here in Spain, they used to just berate him about his game, his video game playing, the way he wasn't disciplined. And part of that's true. He was not as disciplined as he should have been. Now that he's actually playing a lot of matches this season and really contributing to the team, it's a different take on it, Now, the last thing I want to get to before we kind of dissect his moves is just his passing. You've talked about this in our WhatsApp group many a time. And, this is one of the other things that I think he really needs to improve on, because a lot of his passing is either careless or lazy going through the middle, which obviously leads to a counter and an unsuccessful moment. Now, in this season, he has an 80% passing accuracy, obviously, which is very high. But I think, in the moments of the match that you're watching, especially in these past 2 matches, like you said, sometimes he loses the mental focus. And when he thinks too much, those bad passes translates to counterattacks. And we've seen this season that many teams are converting at a high rate on the counterattacks.
Yeah, and his stats are quite misleading, aren't they? And again, we've been able to break this down, and his 80% passing accuracy is good. It's where we'd want someone to be. It's Barca standard. But if you break that down in terms of forward passes or lateral passes in the final third and backwards passes, we've got some real skewed stats here. So we've got backward passes at 90%. And in terms of his passes to the box and his crossing, they're around 30%. And that's horrible. That's awful. Let's be brutally honest. And again, going back to my point earlier, I think that's what we're seeing as Dembélé, the full picture. Those backward passes aren't just I've got nothing on, I'm going to pass it back 5 yards to my fullback. Them passes in a game are I've got someone right up my arse, pardon my French. I need to get this ball out before I get tackled or I take a hit. And again, he's not thinking about those backward passes, or there is no pressure on him. It's one or the other. He's either really high pressure or there's no pressure. Where we start to struggle is when he's got a little bit of time but not enough time. And that's a very strange thing to watch someone go through the motions of that. And so that's why I hope we really get the mental aspect sorted for him, because it's clear that the innate projects, in his mind when he's under pressure allow him to be a high-level footballer. And for me, the big thing I took from these stats, and it's something that thankfully backs up my perception of it, is that my worry is that the reason his crosses and his passes to the box are so poor is because he's ran himself so often into a corner or into a brick wall that he tries effectively a Hail Mary cross. He's not aiming for a player, or as David Beckham used to do, he's not whipping it in to the penalty spot. And if you aren't there as a striker, that's your fault, not mine as a winger, which was the true Beckham style. He's just hitting it, and it's getting cut out. So again, that's why, when we talk about him being in the wrong positions to cross, I think that's what we see, is that he's ran too quickly towards the byline. The ball's going to go out of play, so he just tries to get it in. And we need to stop that, because that's not what we've ever got success from ever in my time watching Barcelona. If we've put the ball in the box, it's been for a purpose. It's been for a reason. It hasn't been just because we don't know what else to do. And I think that's where the worst of Dembélé comes out, to be honest. Yeah,
it's a good point. The 33% really definitely stands out for me, because, again, if you get it to 45, it's just a numbers game, right? If you get it to 45%, let's say, then all of a sudden that's maybe an extra 2 goals. And then all of a sudden, who knows when that's going to happen, right? All this is all about numbers, more opportunities, more goal scoring chances. And obviously with our attacking trio, we should be able to convert at a higher rate. Now let's get into his moves, right? So the first move that you've highlighted is just more about using the space, especially at the halfway line, right? Where he kind of almost dips his shoulder, takes it to the end line, right? I definitely think this is obviously a move that needs to be exploited more, especially when teams are pressing us really high.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to go back to the Thierry Henry example here. Do you remember when we beat Valencia 3-2 in 2000? And it was either December 2008 or January 2009, because it was freezing. I was in Camp Nou. And Henry scored a hat-trick. Messi was terrible. We looked awful, and Henry scored a hat-trick. 2 of the goals that Henry scored were because he took a ball down and instantly exploded into about 35 or 40 yards of space. It was an amazing sight to see. We played awful, and he dragged us out of it. And that's the thing that we don't see Dembélé do enough, is use his pace sensibly. He can beat arguably anyone in the league in a race. And yet what he does so often is start his run far too close to the opposition's goal, which might sound a little bit counterintuitive. Well, why wouldn't you beat the defender closer to the goal? But he runs out of space too quick. And the analogy that I would say is it's like a Ferrari trying to get to 100 mile an hour on the driveway leading up to your garage. You just don't have enough room. You're either going to crash or you're not going to get there. And that's the first thing that I would like to see him do, is maybe if that means he plays slightly deeper, because his heat map that we see definitely has him high up the pitch. But if he's going to use his biggest strength in his armory, which is his pace, I think he needs to drop back 10 or 15 yards and really have the chance to get past someone, because at the minute, he's just running the ball out of play, or as we've just highlighted, he's getting to the point where he has no option but to just hit and hope into the box. So for me, that's the obvious starting point.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing, too, is I think he just needs to understand the spacing more, right? And also use his body to shield defenders, right? It always reminds me in basketball, you're always taught when you're on a fast break, free throw line extended, you break into the basket. And I don't feel Dembélé does that. He is always out wide, which is great, but he's always going in a straight line to the corner, right? It's never going at an angle for a goal-scoring opportunity. I think that could come eventually. That's just coming with more playing time and understanding your body. I think if he, maybe bulks up another 5 pounds upper body, I think he'd be able to shield. But then again, do you lose the speed if you bulk up, right? That's always the vice versa. But at the same time, like you said, I think he needs to utilize that, because especially when teams are playing a high press, we have to exploit that so they do not press us high. So we have more space to play with, right? Now let's go on to the second move.
Yeah, the other thing is, I guess it kind of links to this, which is if you're not going to go past them, then bring them to you. And that's another thing he doesn't quite do enough, is he doesn't draw defenders out to him and make them double up. Now, if he was clever at going into the space, I think this would happen. And we see other people do this. Messi, slightly less so nowadays, but he certainly, if we look back maybe 2, 3 or 4 seasons ago, defenders would double up on Messi because they were scared that he would beat them. And this opened up so much space for other people to exploit. Rakitic was a really good example of this. Messi would draw 2 defenders out and Rakitic would just fill the hole. And it was amazing. And I'm not saying that Rakitic would then go and score or assist, but he would move and recycle the play so often for us by exploiting those gaps. I don't think Dembélé does that. I think Dembélé either offers us something brilliant or nothing at all. Whereas I think what he could do is meet in the middle and start as you said, exploiting space, but actually not just exploiting it, but creating it for us as well. I don't think he does it enough.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You got to use both, right? You got to use the opportunity that you might run, right, to draw them out. And hopefully 100%. If two people come out, then all of a sudden there's going to be a void either behind them or there's going to be a cross available. Now, the last thing we've highlighted is just more shooting, right? He's averaging about 44 to 47% shots on target. That needs to be a little bit better. And I also think he's always trying to hit the best goal also, right? Sometimes you just need to get it on target and we can get the ricochet, right? The goals don't always have to be the most beautiful, right? A goal is a goal. And especially when we're fighting in last minutes, you just need to create chaos. And yes, Dembélé has the ability to shoot with both foot equally, which is very rare for an attacker at that kind of skill level with the type of goals he's able to score, right? But I think if he just, again, this kind of goes down to the concentration level, head down, plant the foot and just hit a nice shot, right? It doesn't have to be the most golazo every time.
Well, yeah, and I mean, look at Messi's 2 goals this weekend. One of them was it's a good goal, but it's probably a bad decision to aim for that post from that distance. But he hits enough of them that eventually one of them will go in. Keepers don't know where he's going. They don't know if he's going to go left, right, low, high. And so he gets the shot off and he gets some luck. And the second one, again, amazing. Different corner, round some defenders, amazing. But what you see with Messi is that he gets himself in positions where he's playing the odds and the odds are in his favour. Messi will generally shoot from a position where he's got more of the goal to hit than less. What we see with Dembélé a lot, he's in a position where he's got less of the goal to hit than more. And it's so hard at that point. So despite the fact that the Dembélé shots on target is a similar level to Messi, Messi's just shooting from better angles. It helps that Messi plays in more centrally. But if you look at where they line up, they're not sharing too dissimilar spaces on a heat map. I think Messi just makes slightly better decisions. So yeah, if it was for me, I would say, 1, definitely exploit the fact that you're 2-footed more, make defenders and goalkeepers guess a little bit more. 2, I would say he needs to stop cutting back in every time and almost being static when he shoots. Sometimes having that momentum, as we saw with Messi's first goal yesterday, having that momentum allows you to generate a bit more power. And finally, just play the angles more in your favor. If you're a quarterback and every single throw is to, back shoulder in the corner of the end zone, don't be surprised when you start to look like Sam Darnold. Ultimately, you've got to make the game work for you rather than making everything difficult. So he's got all of the raw talent in terms of his shooting. His stats are actually okay. It's quite scary to think what they could be if he just put himself in better positions, in my eyes.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, we broke this down. Again, I'm such a fanboy of him because I just love seeing explosive raw power on the football field like this. And to me, just seeing the speed that kills. Now, just really quick, if he masters this, can he get to a 15 to 20 goals per season type of player for Barca?
I think if he gets this right, he's a Pichichi contender. I think he has absolutely everything that if you were designing an attacking forward that would play out wide, you would design Dembélé. He's not bad in the air. He's rapid and defenders should be terrified. Going back to your point, I was a fullback for a long time. I would hate to face him. It would be my nightmare. I would probably be picking up cards very quickly. He's got everything that you would need to go and score 25, 30, 35 goals a season in my eyes. I really hope that Larson can work with him and get his decision-making better. And again, I'd like to think that everything that we've discussed has been balanced and fair and reasoned and constructive criticism, if it has been criticism. But I think it's all because we see so much in him that we know and want him to succeed. And he is getting better in my eyes. I think we're seeing a better version of Dembélé than we have. There's just so much more to come from him, and he's just a scary, scary talent. What about you? Where do you think his ceiling is?
I mean, it's interesting. When you brought up the Pichichi, I didn't even think of that. But, I mean, it's definitely a possibility. I mean, who else in La Liga can match the raw talent that he has, right? I mean, maybe Iñaki Williams. If you're looking forward, I don't see anyone on Madrid, really. That's really who I'm putting in the future. They're the two players that are equally as explosive. And I think Iñaki, the way he's been able to grow into his body lately, I just don't think, Athletic Bilbao is just not as attacking as we are. So we're going to have more opportunities. But again, we are seeing positive steps, him playing more matches. And, again, I'm really excited to see where we go. Well, we're going to talk about Koeman. So when Koeman was signed as Barca's next coach, there was obviously a lot of mixed feelings on the signing. With Barca alive in all three competitions and currently sitting third because Real Madrid won earlier today, we ask, is Koeman the right coach for this Barca? But first, this quick break. Welcome back to Barca Talk. Now, this week, Barcelona lost in the Copa del Rey match against Sevilla, and then they smashed Alavés 5-1. And Craig, I believe this is a microcosm of just what the Koeman era has been, a disjointed performance one day, coming back with another great performance the other day. So let's just start off with the Koeman. Is Koeman really, is he the right coach for this Barca right now? Let's start.
I think the use of the word right now is very clever. Is he the right coach right now? I think so. I think we're seeing a hell of a lot of positives. And remember, we're in a very, very, very difficult state at the minute. And I think he's keeping a lid on a lot of problems at the minute. So I would say he is.
It's interesting because when he first signed, I didn't want him because I just thought that he was too rigid for Barca. I thought he was too fixed with his formation. And obviously seeing what he did at past teams, I wasn't very excited about him. But, it's interesting what, being a Barca fan from month to month, it's a roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah.
We started the season saying we just need to get to fourth, right? And now we are sitting in all competitions, still not playing the best that we can, but we are winning more often than not, and that's a credit to him. So let's start off with this. This is, the question we want to ask also is, has he turned the team around? I just kind of want to ask you, what would define you as a turnaround? Is it just we win Copa del Rey, or do we need to win La Liga as well, and that would be quantified as a turnaround?
I don't think we need to win a trophy at all. I'm not going to be a hypocrite just because we're doing better than I thought we would, and go back and renege on what I said at the start of the season. I said for this to be a turnaround season, we needed to get some kind of success whilst overhauling the squad's age, and he's doing that. We have had more players come through and add value of a young age than any time since 2008. I'd love to see the numbers. Potentially, we've had more debutants than we did in 2008. So I think for me, my idea of a turnaround is give me a squad at the end of the season that can compete for trophies that doesn't have an average age of 34. So for me, I think he's doing it, and I don't need to see silverware this season for it to be a success. What about you?
At the beginning, I wanted a bad season, right? Because I think we needed a little bit of a pushback just to kind of knock us off our perch, to have kind of reality set in about how hard it is to win in world football, especially with the team that we have and also the finances. But again, I'm still not a Koeman fan because I think he still lacks some things. But again, like you said, with the young players and substitutions, which we're going to talk about in a second, I think it's definitely trending in the right way. Now, let's just kind of talk about his style. When he came to Barca, he was iron-fisted to say 4-2-3-1 and nothing else, right? We've seen it in Everton. We saw it in the Dutch national team that he was a 4-2-3-1, and he thought that he was going to be able to unlock De Jong in that formation. He has since ditched that. What would you talk about Koeman's style? Are you adapting to it, or are you still kind of struggling with this style that we're seeing on a week-to-week basis?
Well, I really liked the 4-2-3-1. I just didn't like the people he put in it, to be brutally honest. I thought there was times in the season where we looked really, really good. And I remember us doing a podcast where we talked about the defensive frailties of that system. And we looked at the personnel groupings that had played in it, and we had a specific group of people from memory. I think it was De Jong and Pjanic at the time. And we said, but we haven't conceded when these two are in that position. But when we look at Busquets and any other person, we're shipping goals left, right, and centre. So I think, for me, it wasn't the system; it was the people he was putting in that system, and I enjoyed the style of football we played 4-2-3-1. But now that we've reverted back to the more conventional 4-3-3, I'm genuinely really, really enjoying the football we're playing recently. Even the games that we're losing, I'm quite enjoying them. And and if we break football down to its fundamental components, it's something we all watch as a hobby. None of our jobs depend on it. We don't have any financial skin in the game that we need success. It's something that we do to disconnect and something that we do to enjoy. And I'm enjoying it. And because of that, I feel such reluctance to really criticize. I haven't warmed to him as a man. I think he's been everything I thought he would be. He's a very stereotypically Dutch, stoic, resilient, almost with a touch of arrogance about him, very similar to Cruyff. Let's not forget that Cruyff had a lot of the same flaws that Koeman had as a man, even if he didn't have them as a footballer. So I wouldn't say I was surprised by anything he's done, but I just think that he's been the right man to do this. If we all accept that he's going to be here for a very finite period of time, we needed someone that could come in with the arrogance, the ego, the experience, and the wherewithal to overhaul a squad of overpaid, overaged players. And he's doing that. And I find it so hard to criticize him, even though I don't want him here next season, which I also wrestle with that. Is I don't want to be Madrid and get rid of successful managers. And I'm saying he's been successful. So, I've just really tied myself up in knots there. But my answer is I am enjoying him. I am enjoying the football, but I hope it's not a long-term thing.
I mean, again, it's so hard because there's just no consistency, right? Like you said, yes, I think the games are definitely more enjoyable this season because of the unpredictability, right? I think that is a huge factor in it. We don't know what's going to happen, and I think that has added to the viewing pleasure of it because in the last two seasons, let's be honest, we knew we were going to do the same thing. We were going to try to, we were going to win 7 out of 10 games essentially, and it was going to be the same thing. But there was no passion, as my Italian friend would say. There was no, I don't know, just everything looked very lackluster, right? And now it's the unpredictability that has really added the excitement to watch Barca week in and week out. Now, another thing I want to highlight, I think for me was the substitutions that he's been using. Now, my biggest gripe with Valverde was not using the subs enough and giving rest to the players. And now Koeman is doing that, and he's doing that often. Now, just in the Alavés match, he used 5 subs, obviously leading up to the PSG match that's this week. And in the Sevilla match, he used 2. So I still think the substitution issue is still an issue because there's just no predictability. It's always kind of just, I'm going to grab this player and see what I can do and just kind of throw it at, for example, when we were trying to have the comeback against Rayo Vallecano, for example, and he just like sticks in Trincao and just like go after it, and just kind of there's no coaching in that ability, right? You're just throwing a player, there's no advice. And again, the substitution patterns are still unique and again very unpredictable still.
I think unlike Valverde, who would often be bringing on players like Arturo Vidal, Ivan Rakitic, Luis Suarez, he was bringing on players often that had experience. And you could also, you could almost argue at that point, fair enough, he should be able to tell these guys to do an assignment and they should be able to do it. I think the difference I would say with Koeman is that 1, he's often picking from a fairly stretched bench in terms of experience. And 2, how many times have we seen him, to his credit, I might add, bring on a youngster at that point? And I think we really need to be careful about overcoaching players in a live match situation. So if you've got Conrad, for example, and it's your 3rd appearance at Barca, you've played all of your time as an attacking right winger, and all of a sudden you have to go on the left for whatever reason, the last thing you want is a coach telling you more than you need to know. You need to almost get a pat on the backside, a bit of a cuddle, a G up, and say, go and enjoy yourself and make something happen. I think because Koeman is very rarely picking from people who are fully experienced, I think we have to give him a bit of the benefit of the doubt for what we perceive as a lack of coaching for these subs coming on. I think the other thing is also, it probably just highlights again that it's a failing of forward planning because, if you look at it on an average week, particularly with the injuries that we've had, which again, Koeman can't control, we could argue that he needs to put better training regimes, etc. in, but in reality, he can't control this. It's a contact sport. When was the last time that you looked at it and thought there was a glaringly obvious substitution because someone on the bench was so guaranteed to make an impact? I don't really feel that this season. I don't remember a single game really where I've thought, I cannot believe you haven't brought X off the bench before now because X will definitely give us Y. I know there's some people that will say that Ricky Puig spent far too much time on the bench, and that's fair. I'm never going to say those people are wrong. But in reality, we're talking again about a relatively inexperienced yet very good player. So I think we need to be careful not to criticize Koeman because of Valverde's failings and actually look at Koeman in the context of what Koeman is dealing with and the cards that he holds at the poker table.
Yeah, it's a good point. And let's get into it. I think out of all the things we can talk about Koeman is he has been the last coach, since maybe Pep, really diving into La Masia players and young players, right? So against Sevilla, we had, Mingueza playing. We have De Jong. I'm going to put him as well because obviously he's under 25. I would, Pedri, obviously, Dembélé as well. That was in the Sevilla match. And then in the Alavés match, we saw Moriba get the start, right? So diving in with La Masia players, I think, like you said, for me this season has been one of the most exciting aspects of this season because, as we talked about earlier in the episode, these are the players that could be the next golden era, right? These are the players that are going to fight for Barca, and I'm really excited to see them because they're almost at another level, right? With the speed that they have, the talent. Now, we have to give Koeman credit for diving deep into that well.
Absolutely, and the one example that stands out to me is how much credit does Koeman deserve for putting Mingueza at right back, a guy that, as we've said several times, wasn't even a particular standout in Barca B. How much credit does Koeman deserve for putting him there instead of playing Junior Firpo out of position? That's the easy move. That's the illogical decision to make, is that you play Firpo out of position, hoping that he's a better, more experienced professional. And that, to me, is a microcosm of Koeman. We might not like certain things that he's doing, but we might see the 2020-21 season under Koeman might be the foundations that we lay that allows us to go and get a significant amount of success with players that might not have been given the opportunity under many other managers, largely because of circumstance, but also it still takes a brave man to put them in there and to make them feel comfortable playing. These young kids have got smiles on their faces. They look like they want to express themselves, which again has to be down to managers. So I think it's a hugely important point. Koeman could be creating a legacy for himself here that we'll all be thankful for in several years' time.
For sure. And the biggest, I would say elephant in the room is, what's going to happen next season with the new president, right? Especially if he wins Copa del Rey, that's a big issue. But more importantly, let's finish off the segment with, what makes a good Barca manager? I have here on our doc, for me, the biggest thing is tactical adaptivity going forward, especially now in world football. We saw that he went to a 4-2-3-1. He has changed to a 4-3-3. And obviously, I think another one, because we have such high price salary players, it's player locker room management. And the last thing for me is player development, like still taking those players and making them 5 to 10% better.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think for me, there's two things that stand out. One of them is the beauty of the game. As you've said, developing young players, making them players play good football and making them something that we want to watch on a weekly basis, no matter where we are in the world. The second thing is just having the presence and the persona that you can handle everything that gets thrown at you. Make no mistake, being the Barcelona manager is a toxic, horrible job a lot of the time. The media in Spain is awful. The pressure that gets thrown at him, if we drop a point and Madrid win, it's the end of the world. And I think you need to be able to cope with that. And for all of his faults, Koeman does that. And I think right now, especially the situation that this Barca finds itself in, I'm starting to think that Koeman is potentially the best person that we could have got. Pre this and post this, I would disagree. But I think right now, this year, maybe Koeman is the best Barca manager for now that we could have got.
Let's just finish off with this. How can he get Barca even better? How could he further get them to the next level? For me, I think the biggest thing I want to see is just some more player development. I just like, for example, with the youngsters, they're getting great playing time, and we've seen kind of their baseline. Like, for example, with Pedri, for example. But I just want to see that coaching to help get him another 5% at the end of the season, where we can say, okay, Pedri in September, because of coaching, now he's making XYZ better passing and more awareness. Like that to me is one of the most important aspects of this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be very hard to quantify because of how many youngsters he's played. But I take your point completely. I would actually say it's not the youngsters per se. I think it's realistically it's going to be Coutinho and Dembélé and Griezmann that I want to see that from. But I fully take your point. For me, very, very easily and very quickly, he needs to get players back and fit more consistently, which isn't in his gift, but he needs that to happen. Secondly, he needs to get a 9 from somewhere. That realistically can't be this season, but if he stays on, he needs a 9 from somewhere that isn't Braithwaite. And finally, he needs to either replace Busquets or he needs to buy another midfielder that he trusts so that Frenkie de Jong can play there instead. That is the one glaring weak error that I can see that we aren't able to fix by injuries is Busquets should not be our starting holding midfielder, and he is. So I think there's probably a few things that would make a massive difference. Two of them rely on finances. One of them relies on luck. So good luck to him.
Well, speaking of Koeman as a coach, this week is a major week, Craig, because Barca are playing in Champions midweek. Wednesday night, they're facing PSG at the Camp Nou, and Cadiz at home as well on Sunday afternoon in the early kickoff. Really quick, in our WhatsApp group for our patrons, I sent a video of the PSG Ultras sending PSG to Barcelona. So that was pretty crazy. As you can see, the PSG Ultras are on another level. So Craig, any quick thoughts on those two important matches this week?
I really like watching Cadiz play. I think they're a great team to watch. So that should be a lot of fun, hopefully. And obviously, we should hopefully get the win there. In terms of PSG, I've got a bit of a dislike for them, to be honest. I've had relationships longer than the history that football club's had. So I think they should probably calm down a little bit. They are throwing money and still not winning. So let's hope we really do destroy them, because they're awful. They're the Getafe of European football. How about you?
Yeah, I'm really curious about the PSG match, because I think with all the past 2 weeks with the Paris media riling up Barca with Messi going, I want to see how Barca react. More importantly, if we can adapt, because Craig, Pochettino has used 4 different tactical formations in the last 5 games for PSG. And that to me is going to be mighty huge to see how Koeman adapts and see what happens. So next week, Alejandro and I are going to talk about these matches, and obviously we're going to review what the wake of the week of Barca. And until next week, Forza Barca.